Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to CarMiZa. Again, if you're not familiar with why the name Miza, M-I-Z-A, my last name is Mickney, M-I. Earl Zalsmer's last name is Zalsmer, Z-A, so M-I-Z-A. This car, again, if you're not aware, was owned by Earl Zalsmer, and the car is a 94 BMW 540i and was quite famous in the car audio days back in the mid-90s. So I am rebuilding the car kind of back to what he had. So today is October 2nd, 2022. Yet kind of another milestone with the build. The Dynamat is all applied throughout the entire interior, and this video is going to kind of focus on that. So to date, again, I've owned the car now for just over 2 years, and I'm at about 560 hours for the build. And some of the different things that includes was stripping out the entire interior, cleaning everything, redoing all of that OEM wiring, including rebuilding that HVAC box. I bought a parts car, stripped it in entirety. Did a lot of testing on the Sony ES stuff. For those of you who are interested, if you could see that right there, there's a couple of C1 changers. I have decided to go the route of the original P1, X1, C1 like Earl had in the car. So I am no longer doing the Z50. I have decided to go the route of the original stuff for a variety of reasons. Okay. All right. In terms of the details of the Dynamat, it took about 63 hours to prep, to clean, remove the old Dynamat, get everything ready to apply the new Dynamat. It took about 55 hours to apply all the Dynamat that you see, which was a lot. There is at least 2 layers on every surface, and I say at least 2 layers because it was 2 layers, and then I overlapped by about 25% as well. So, maybe 2 1/4 layers. 244 square feet of material was used in the car, which is 110 pounds. And then I also did the door covers, which I'll cover in just a moment. But as a reminder, those are the covers that go over the openings within the doors, just to add a bit more in terms of sound deadening and reduce road noise. At this point, let me step out. The car definitely feels very, very solid. When Earl came over recently to check the progress of the car, the first thing he did was walk up and say, okay, the thud is back. Okay. So the car is extremely solid at this point. I do not think I'll have much issue with resonance, but I will be installing the woofers and doing some sine sweeps at low frequencies just to double check and make sure there is nothing resonating throughout the car. As far as the doors go, just again, this video will kind of serve as a summary of a lot of the things that I did with the Dynamat, some of which you may have already seen in other videos that I've posted. But think of this as just kind of a review. Again, on the doors, you'll notice here is one of the holes in the door. There's another one right below here. This is a huge opening in the door. So my objective here was to build these plates, and these would kind of block off the sound, if you will. There are no door speakers, again, as a reminder. There won't be any in the car. It's just going to be the 2 little woofers and the kicks. And then 4.5-inch mid and tweeter up on the top of the dash. Those are all Bowers & Wilkins, the same drivers that Earl used in his initial first setup when him and Henry built the car. So, again, these door covers, these are really solid. I built these out of ABS plastic. That way I could shape them. As you can see, that one there has got quite a bit of a bend to it to allow for room for, there's a little coin tray in the factory door pocket that goes here, but this I needed a bend to clear that. All of the factory, it's one other thing to note too, all of the original parts, anything that was suspect, like the door panels, I checked those, everything fits perfect. But these door covers are ABS plastic, 16 gauge steel, and you can see kind of the outline of that right there on the front and on the back side. And then that is riveted to, all 3 pieces are kind of riveted together like a sandwich. So very, very solid. and that's going to be throughout the doors. Okay, all 4 doors. One of the other thing too, if you are dynamatting and you're looking for some suggestions, be really careful of your door drains. So here you can see right here on this car has 2 drains per door, one here at the front or at the back of the door, and then one up here at the front of the door. Make sure, be mindful that you don't plug those when you're dynamatting or sound deadening. And make sure, you know, in this car's a 94, so it's, gosh, coming up on 30 years old. Those things were plugged, both of them on every door were plugged. Old Dynamat, dirt, leaves, there was all kinds of junk in there. So the last thing you want to do is do a great job of, you know, dynamatting the door, and then next thing you find out, you've done a great job of also sealing it and making a giant aquarium you're driving around with, and that will obviously rot your doors right out real quick. So be careful there. Also, just to reiterate, if you notice, I left the door panels on this car go right up to this edge, so they're like flush with the metal, but I left about a 1-inch gap here all the way around on all 4 doors because the car is going to be resprayed. I'm hoping that I do that, do a complete paint job on the car, and I wanted to be able to mask up to that. So that was taken into consideration. Also, if you notice, I did intentionally kind of leave a perimeter along things, you know, like you can see the roof. I didn't bring the Dynamat right up to the glass. I also was cognizant up here, this frame is basically where the moonroof mounts to, and if I Dynamated this surface, the roof assembly would sit lower because of whatever I added for a gap here. As a result, it would not sit flush because it's a true moonroof, and I didn't want that. So I did not apply Dynamat there, and obviously I don't think there's a big difference in performance there. Also, if you notice, like along the windshield, so on and so forth, nice, clean, consistent gap. But otherwise, you know, there is Dynamat applied to basically every surface. Okay. And for those of you who know the car, there's the old fuse holder in the back. That obviously has to be redone, replated and everything, but things will, and that will be set up the same way that Earl had it. Okay, Earl and Henry built. Also, one other thing to note, I know that there are a bunch of different products out there, sound deadening products. I stuck with Dynamat. I really like the product, and there's kind of a nostalgic mystique to it as well, because that's what Earl used when he originally built the car, and I'm trying to kind of time capsule a lot of this, if you would. So, you know, the old stuff, the original stuff that was in the car was asphalt based, and it was peeling, and it did a pretty good job of holding up after almost 30 years, but I wasn't going to be able to get any more of that, so I said, all right, I'm just going to start from scratch with all the new stuff. So that's what I did. Let's go over here. I want to show you a couple of things. Again, I had these tools laid out in one of the prior videos, but I just want to run down what I did here. This is the original Dynamat roller. Gosh, from probably about when the car was born, mid-90s when I bought it initially, and I used this. It's a good roller. It does a great job. Dynamat, if you're listening, here is what I would suggest. This is the set of rollers I bought off of Amazon. This is, I think that's like a 1/4 inch. This one's 1/2 or 3/4 or inch or whatever. And then a wider roll, I think a 2.5. It's got indications on there, but they're wrong. They're metal, they're really heavy, which do a great job, but there are 2 issues with these rollers. Number one, they come with grooves, you know, kind of built into them. It's cool, it's a great idea, because that way when you run over the material, you can tell which areas you have ran over and which ones you haven't, so it kind of marks it for you. The trouble is, if you really push down hard, it'll destroy the aluminum and start cutting it up. So I took a grinder to all 3 of these and effectively grind them smooth. What I would suggest in terms of what would be optimal would be 3 different size rollers like this, smooth, and then the edge of this, much like I did, is rounded off. That way you don't have a sharp metal edge that also could kind of put, you know, creases in it. As it is, if you look at when I did the, when I rolled it, you can see like right there where it looks, it's kind of scratched. That's okay. I'm not worried about that. Functionally, it is very, very solid, and you know, the material is definitely, there are no gaps. Effectively, if the material is not touching the metal, it does not serve its purpose, right? Couple of other things, again, just as a kind of a recap. Reamer, I think it was like $5 at Harbor Freight. This was great to use when I had a hole, like in the door panels, for example. When I needed to put the inserts in, I would put this in, spin it around a couple times, pull it out. It pulled out the extra material. I also use these. This, again, is cheapy from Harbor Freight. These are hole punches, like out of a leather punch set. This came in real handy. I'll show you. For example, like, see this stud right here? I wanted a nice clean edge. I didn't want to just rip the Dynamat because it would just do just that rip. So on any of these, I basically just went around like that and then took a pick tool and was able to pull out a nice clean round piece of Dynamat. Okay, so that just gave me a little bit better fit and finish there. Also, in terms of, you know, you got your rollers, those do a great job. I would highly encourage anybody applying material. You really need rollers. You can't just do it by hand. I also used this pick tool. This was really good to get, if you notice it's rounded, to get into some of the tight areas like this area, for example, in the corner of the windshield. You can see really, really tight areas, and that, you know, the roller couldn't get in there. That did a great job. And then the larger radiuses, I used this, just a snap-on screwdriver, and used the butt end of it, which is perfectly round. It does a great job of kind of smoothing those contours. Another thing I'd mentioned previously, what I did, this was kind of my workstation when I applied the Dynamat. I would lay a sheet down, go through, take my measurements, mark the Dynamat, and then cut it with, I had a square, big square, and a 4-foot level if I needed a big cut. But when you mark the Dynamat, you don't want to do it with, most of this material is going to be black, right? So I wouldn't suggest using a black Sharpie. So I just got myself a silver Sharpie, and that worked really well. It's very easy to see. Next thing here is the Dynatape. This is, saw a lot of mixed reviews. People are really calling this out or whatever. But I think they misunderstood the intention. This is basically just used to give you a finished edge. It's not going to do anything from a sound deadening perspective. It just gives you a clean, finished look. Again, for example, what I've done so far, I didn't have a ton of it. I only had a few rolls, but I did the perimeter of the doors, and that gives me a nice clean edge all the way around. The second purpose of it, which is why I'll be getting more of it, is because if you notice, like right here, for example, you can see where the butyl squeezed out, especially if you really roll it down hard. And the problem is if I sit in the car, my butt's going to stick to it, right now, or you put anything in there before I go to the next step, it becomes pretty sticky. So the Dynatape over that will definitely help to get rid of that. One other thing, kind of a pro tip here, the material itself, basically the way it's set up is, if you notice, and these are the large sheets, 4 square foot sheets, on two of the edges, this edge and this edge, you'll notice, and I'll use this piece as an example, that they overlap the aluminum by, I don't know, 1/8 inch, 3/16. And you can see that. See where that's the aluminum? So when you get an edge like that and you roll it, it's really nice because you don't have any butyl squeezing out. So if you were to apply this piece, for example, you would want this edge to be one of your finished edges. If I'm going to overlap, I would want to do it like that. You know what I mean? Or better yet, like that. Now I've got finished edge, so on and so forth. So just a little bit of a tip there for anyone using the material. All right, let's see. A few other things. We'll have this video wrapped up for you. In terms of a heat gun, I did a bunch of research and wanted to see what people were doing. Some people said, yeah, use a heat gun, love doing it. Others say, no, don't do it, because it can actually be messier. I would agree with don't do it. For me, it was 100 to 115 degrees out. I'm in Arizona. And I'm actually, while I'm talking, I'm gonna go over to the back of the car. I think this is a cool shot. And for me, it was hot out, so I didn't really need to worry about it. And I did not do any kind of heat. I tried. I kind of messed around with it and tried, and it actually did make it just messier and worse. Okay, so I suggest probably not doing any kind of heat. I even tried laying a couple of pieces in the driveway. You know, I figured, oh, this would be great to get it nice and hot. It's just turned into a gooey mess. So I would suggest no heat unless you're somewhere where it's really cold. One other thing I did want to mention about the build so far, and especially as it relates to the Dynamat, it is critical to me that this car remains very serviceable. And I'm not knocking anybody, but I see some installs where, for example, they'll Dynamat or, you know, apply a sound deadening material to the doors, and they go right over wiring, or they go over a hole. And then if the window regulator goes, for example, you're going to have to cut the Dynamat to remove the window regulator and replace it. So again, it's extra time. It's a lot of extra time, but, you know, I'm over 100 hours just doing the Dynamat. But I wanted these, you know, again, these panels are all removable, all stainless steel hardware that could be removed. I could have these off and have the exact same access that I had prior to Dynamat. And nothing is covered with Dynamat in terms of wiring or you know, mechanisms or anything like that. Everything is still 100% functional and visible. So I think that's really important, and that will be the case as I do the rest of the build. Some of the next things that I will be doing, so just so everyone knows, in terms of, I did all the Dynamatting, and I will be doing some expandable spray foam in the C pillars, in the roof frame, and in the A pillars. There's really, the B pillars need to be hollow for the seatbelt mechanisms, but I will be doing that, so that'll deaden up the car a little bit further. I'm not going to do anything down in the in the floor area, because that entire cavity along that bottom channel is opened up, and I think that that may help the subs a bit in terms of, you know, the airspace. They're effectively infinite baffle, but I want to keep them that way. I don't want to do anything that may adversely affect them. I'm going to be taking the OEM wiring, all this factory wiring. As you can see, it's just kind of laying around just to keep it far out of my way as I was applying the Dynamat, including like the fuse box is just kind of sitting in there. I'm going to remount everything, and I'm going to come up with a means by which I will attach the factory wiring to the car. There are plastic channels that it goes into for, you know, like along the bottoms of the door openings. But there are several places, like here, for example, where there was some factory clips. The factory was pretty inconsistent about the hardware it used, and a lot of it's brittle, broken, and can't be replaced because it's no longer available. So I think I'm going to use just a basic zip tie bracket that I will secure with stainless steel screws, making sure nothing goes through the car, piercing the, you know, to the outside of the car. And I will apply those. I just want something that's solid, and I want to be consistent. That's really important to me. If I can't be OEM, I want it to be as good as or better than OEM, serviceable and consistent. So we'll be working on that. After that, I think my next thing to move on to is the stereo wiring. So I'll be working with straight wires for that, using similar products to what Earl had at the original time in the car, probably even the same speaker wire. Which was their Maestro, which is about just a touch over 1/2 inch in diameter. So I got to figure out getting 3 runs to each side of the front of the car as cleanly as possible. So I'll be working on that a little bit. Let me just take one other shot of the detail of the woofer area, just so you guys can see that. Again, there's the passenger door and the woofer area. Again, now you can see it's a, Earl called them a 13-inch, but I think it's technically a 12-inch Bowers & Wilkins woofer that will go in there. I already have the subs. They fit in perfectly. As a matter of fact, if you notice, it's intentionally metal there, and the woofer basket I'm removing the gasket on the back of the woofer basket. Earl determined early on that metal to metal and getting that tactile transfer really made a big difference. So instead of decoupling, these are actually going to be as solid to the, the woofer to as solid to the car as possible. And obviously that is rock solid. So it's 1/4 inch plate steel that was welded all the way around every single inch on the front and back side. So you can see some of the welds in there still. So, all right, guys, I think that's it. I appreciate you watching, and as soon as there's another video available, I will go ahead and post it. For all of you who know the car, little piece of nostalgia there. There's the original fuse holder. Very much in need of refinishing, but I'm going to maintain that same setup that Earl had, and that will be in the same place. So, all right, thanks very much for watching. Talk to you soon.